A human language, such as English, is made up of sound and meaning. Sounds by themselves do not mean anything. So, how does sound relate to meaning? The first step is to build the smallest meaningful unit of a language, a morpheme. Here the relation between sound and meaning is mostly arbitrary. You cannot predict on the basis of the sounds what the meaning is going to be. But once you combine morphemes with each other to create complex forms with complex meanings, the relation between sound and meaning is no longer arbitrary. It is predictable from the morphemes and the way they're combined. That's what we're going to explore here, the syntax of a language, the way morphemes, words, and phrases are combined to generate sentences. There are several ingredients that we need to properly characterize our syntactic knowledge. Categories, such as noun and verb. Grammatical functions, such as subject and object. And rules for combining meaningful units, such as morphemes and words, into larger units, such as constituents and sentences. Let's start with categories. What is this? If you speak English, you answer, a yellow dot. That's good English. You could not say, a dot yellow a dot a yellow. That's not good English. That's why these phrases are marked with an asterisk. So, despite the fact that I understand each word, I would not understand what you are saying. That's an important observation about language. Words are arranged in a particular way to form larger phrases that we can interpret. So, how do we best describe this observation? We could specify for each word whether it precedes or follows another word. So, precedes yellow and yellow precedes dot. This would be an accurate description of the facts, but it's not very satisfying. For each word of the language, we would have to specify which words of the language it precedes. It's as if we were to create a one-to-one map of a language. We do not want an infinite number of rules. The thing to do is to classify these words. Those words that share the same distribution belong to the same class. That's what a category is. It's like each word has a label that specifies its category. And then we can use these labels in the rules we use to generate complex expressions. For the phrases we have seen so far, the categories involved are noun, adjective, and article. And with those labels, we can write a single rule to generate the right order. Article precedes adjective, and adjective precedes nouns. That's much better than having an infinite number of rules. Now, here's an interesting puzzle about categories. If you speak English, you know this syntactic rule. But if you're not a linguist, chances are that you are not aware that you know this rule. You might not even be aware of its ingredients, the categories. So, if I ask you, what's the category of a, or yellow, or dot, you might get annoyed with me. Don't ask me that. I was never good at grammar. So on the one hand, you know the category of every word you use. But on the other hand, you don't seem to be consciously aware of this knowledge. So what you know and what you know that you know doesn't quite match up. What you are aware of is just the tip of an iceberg. There is a lot hidden, including your tacit syntactic knowledge. Knowing the category of a word is not the only kind of tacit syntactic knowledge. If the yellow dot chases the ghost, the phrase, a yellow dot, appears at the beginning of the sentence. But if the ghost is chasing the dot, then the phrase, a ghost, appears at the beginning of the sentence. The phrase at the beginning of these sentences is the subject. So in English, we can describe the order of phrases within a sentence as subject precedes verb and verb precedes object. Now, again, we have an iceberg puzzle. Since syntactic rules in English make reference to subject and object, If you speak English, you just know what the subject of the sentence is. But if I ask you, what's the subject of the sentence? You might get annoyed with me again because you don't think you know much about grammar. Or else, you might think that you know the subject is the doer or the agent. But in this case, what you know doesn't actually match up with the facts. In The Ghost is Chased by the Yellow Dot, the ghost is not the agent, but it is the grammatical subject. And in The Yellow Dot is Chased by the Ghost, the yellow dot is not the agent, but it is the grammatical subject. To find the subject and the object of a sentence, we have to do a little more than think about who is doing what. In English, we have several ways to diagnose the grammatical function, but none of them are based on the meaning of the phrase. For example, we can add a question tag, as in, Pac-Man was chased by the ghost, wasn't he? This will immediately tell you what the subject is because you will have to repeat the subject. He in wasn't he refers to Pac-Man. So, if you know how to form a question tag, you know what the subject is, even if you don't know that you know that. Now, grammatical functions do not associate with individual words, but instead they associate with entire phrases. For example, the big yellow dot with the wide open mouth consists of 9 words, but they're all part of the same phrase, the subject. So there's an entire string of words that functions as a unit of language. This means that words are not just combined together like beads on a string. Some words belong together more closely than others. We can illustrate this by representing a sentence in the form of a tree diagram. To understand the beauty of these tree diagrams, let's look at a complex word like undoable. This word has 2 meanings. It can mean that something is not doable. So, for example, Pac-Man can swallow 1 ghost at a time. That's doable. But he cannot swallow 2 ghosts at the same time. That's undoable. But undoable can also mean that it is possible to undo something. If you accidentally delete an entire page while you're writing your term paper, you can always press Ctrl-Z and you are able to undo your last command. It is undoable. These 2 meanings arise despite the fact that undoable is made up from the same 3 morphemes, un, do, and able. So where is this difference in meaning coming from? It comes from the way we combine the morphemes. You can combine un with do first, creating undo, and then you add able. This gives you able to undo. Or you can combine do with able first, creating doable, and then you add un. This gives you not doable. The way we combine morphemes has an effect on the interpretation of the word, and that's because things that we combine first form a unit, and the initial unit gets interpreted. We call this type of ambiguity a structural ambiguity. It's an ambiguity because the same form has 2 meanings, and it's a structural ambiguity because the 2 meanings come about by the way the combination of morphemes is structured. This seems obvious once you say it, but sometimes even the obvious has to be pointed out. This particular obvious thing was pointed out by Gottlob Frege, a German philosopher.
The meaning of a complex expression is determined by the meanings of its constituent expressions and the rules used to combine them.
That's exactly what we just found. There is an important lesson here. We cannot talk about the combinatorial rules in terms of linear order. In both versions of undoable, the linear order of the morphemes is the same, but there is a hidden structure which has an effect on the interpretation. This is what tree structures allow you to get across. Structural ambiguity is not only found in complex words, we also find it in sentences. Pac-Man chased the ghost in a race car is ambiguous. It can mean two different things. Pac-Man may be doing the chasing in a race car, or else Pac-Man may be chasing a ghost that drives a race car. So again, the ingredients of the sentence, the words, are the same. That's not the source of the ambiguity. The source of the ambiguity is the hidden structure, the way the words are combined. You can combine chased with a ghost first, and then you add in a race car. This gives you chase the ghost in a race car. Or you combine the ghost with in a race car to give you the ghost in a race car. And then you add the verb chased later. So the tree structure allows you to show that certain strings of words act as units. They are constituents or phrases. So again, this is another iceberg puzzle. You know that the ghost in a race car is a constituent, but if I ask you to identify the constituents of this sentence, you would, once again, get annoyed with me. Knowing the constituents of a sentence is part of our tacit knowledge. Since you now know that you have all of this knowledge, you can relax and stop thinking that you were never good at grammar. It's time for you to find out what you actually know when you know your language.